Hello guys, and welcome back to Most Coasters. Today I'm going to be doing a top 25 list of my top 25 coasters that I have ridden. Let's get straight to today's video. Okay, so a little bit ago I put out a poll with a few different video options and you guys overwhelmingly chose the top 25 coasters. I haven't formally made a list for a very long time, and I haven't made a video since 2020, May of 2020, so it has been a very long time, so I'm a little excited to do this. Let's start off with some honorable mentions. These are probably the worst coasters to place. There's so many coasters that are just in this like medium tier. In 30th place is Batman the Ride at Six Flags Great America. In 29th place is Raptor at Cedar Point. In 28th place is Viper at Six Flags Great America. 27th place is X-Flight, and in 26th place is Full Throttle at Six Flags Magic Mountain. Now let's get to the top 25. Number 25 is Mr. Freeze Reverse Blast. This is a good coaster. It doesn't really excel as much as the rest of the coasters in this list, and I think in a year probably it'll be gone. But it is still a good coaster, so it did manage to make that 25th spot. In 24th place is Hydra the Revenge at Dorney Park, one of two of Dorney Park's coasters that made it on this list. This coaster is a decent flowless coaster, definitely one of the better ones I've ridden. It has a very unique start and a very good JoJo roll, so those are probably the highlight elements that got it here. The layout's good overall and has a very good setting, so that is number 24. In 23rd place is West Coast Racers. This is a decent launch coaster. The biggest flaw is probably the restraint, which is kind of tough, and the vehicles are extremely small for no particular reason. But besides that, it's a very fun coaster. Great layout, good inversions, and I do like that you basically get two coasters in one. It's very fun that way. In 22nd place is Talon, the other Dorney Park coaster that made it here. This is a decent invert. To me, it's just an extended Batman the Ride. It has a very similar start to Batman the Rides, and then it veers off a little bit with some unique elements, forceful helix. Overall, it's just a good invert, just not as good as the rest of the coasters on this list. In 21st place is the Dark Knight. I believe the only other floorless coaster on this list, and definitely the best floorless coaster I have ridden. Six Flags New England is lucky to have it, and it is definitely a hidden gem. In number 20 is Max Force. It is here because of the launch and nothing else. I guess also that 60 mile an hour inversion is also really good, now the world's second fastest inversion. But besides that, the layout doesn't have too much to offer, and so it could be a lot higher if the layout was longer. In number 19 is Stormrunner at Hersheypark, and it is Max Force but longer, which is why it is one spot higher. It has one of the most unique inversions I've ever seen, with, I believe, the flying snake dive. I think the biggest problem with this coaster is the restraints. If it had different restraints, like Top Thrill Dragster, it would be significantly better. In number 18 is Tatsu. This is the best flying coaster on this list, and I think overall is one of the better coasters at Magic Mountain. I think it just has a much longer layout. The setting is awesome. I think it is more intense and also longer, like I said, than the other flying coasters in the Six Flags chain. So it just has more to offer, and I think is a really good coaster. In number 17 is Sky Rush at Hersheypark. I think this coaster kind of lacks in a lot of aspects. It's just speed and turns. It doesn't have a ton of airtime, and especially with the restraints, it's hard to experience that airtime. But it's here for a reason, and that's why it's number 17. And number 16 is Banshee. I believe the best invert on this list. It just has some really good elements that I love. That dive loop into a vertical loop is iconic, and then with the 0G roll, it's just a really good invert overall. And number 15 is Superman the Ride at Six Flags New England. This coaster has a near perfect layout for me. The only reason it is not higher is honestly just the restraints. This is significantly better than the other Superman hyper coasters that I've seen, although I've not ridden them. This just seems to have a more unique layout. I like the tunnels. I just wish the restraints were different because I just bang my knees every time. And number 14 is Goliath at Six Flags Great America. This is just too short a ride, frankly. It has an amazing layout for the 1 minute ride time, but it's just too short. I do love that stall, and I think Great America is lucky to have this coaster. And number 13 is Candemonium at Hersheypark. This is one of the most underrated coasters I have ridden, although it is not the best hyper coaster on this list and not even really close. I do think it's a really good ride. It has very good airtime and very unique elements for a hyper, so that's one thing I really like about that, is that B&M tried something very different with this coaster, but I don't think it turned out as well as some of the more traditional hypers like Diamondback. In number 12 is another unconventional hyper, and that is Raging Bull. This one, however, I like a lot more, especially with that first drop is incredible in the back row. One of the best first drops I've ever ridden, maybe even the best actually. Other than that, there's only a few other really good airtime moments, but I do think the speed you get on some of the turns at the end is very good. I think it's more of a fun ride and less of a really top tier ride. And number 11 is American Thunder at Six Flags St. Louis. I'm sure this is a very surprising pick, but I just love GCI wooden coasters. You'll see this with one other really surprising coaster on this list. I just love GCI wooden coasters because, especially with a lot of the wooden coasters I've ridden, they're not smooth. So to have a smooth coaster with bountiful airtime, fun turns, a lot of speed, and it's even pretty short, but it's a really good ride. Especially when you're riding it on a couch. That really does help. And I got like 15 rides on this because Six Flags St. Louis has no lines, so that probably helps too. And number 10 is Top Thrill Dragster at Cedar Point. Although it does not operate anymore, it probably won't operate under the same name. It was a very intense coaster. That launch is incredible. And the kind of forces you get going down that top hat are really good, even in like some of the middle rows, which is where I most often rode. And number 9 is Diamondback. I believe the highest hyper on this list. It takes you out into the woods, which is very fun, very good airtime, and the ending is really fun with that helix up and then into the splashdown. I am a sucker for splashdowns, so that does not hurt this coaster either. And number 8 is Millennium Force. This coaster is a little overrated in my opinion. It is fairly high on my list, but I don't think it should be as high on some other people's list. It has some really good elements, I'll say that, but it just doesn't have as many unique elements. That first drop is really good, and some of the really speedy turns are also incredible, but it's just so repetitive, it almost gets boring a little bit by the end, which I know is kind of not good to say, but that's just kind of how I feel. And number 7 is Orion at Kings Island. This is the second best Kings Island coaster on this list, and it is really a good one. It has also some very unique elements. It's not as tall as a lot of the other Gigas, but I still think it's really good. It has actually some interesting elements too. I kind of like the Outer Bank turn, and there's that like weird S airtime hill or whatever that thing was. Loved that. I just think it has some really unique elements, and different than Candemonium, it actually paid off for me in Orion. So yeah, very good ride at Kings Island. And number 6 is X2. I know this is a little low given the amount of parks I've been to. I think some people might have this in number 1 and number 2. I think it's just too intense. That sounds really dumb, but there's a point that it's just so intense it's a little hard to enjoy. I did still really enjoy it, and I got 2 rides, but the over intense ride in some aspects, especially towards the middle of the ride, combined with the horrible operations, I just didn't like this coaster as much as some of the other ones. And number 5 is Mystic Timbers. This is the best Kings Island coaster, and I told you there's going to be another surprising wooden coaster, and it's right here with Mystic Timbers. This thing is a beast, no pun intended. I love Mystic Timbers. I think it has some really good elements. I just have never experienced a wooden coaster so smooth with so many incredible airtime moments. That first drop's really good. That second, that first hill you go into after the drop is also really good, provides some good airtime off that. And then just all the hills with the tunnel and all that. It's a great overall experience. The shed was disappointing, but I didn't really hype that at all, so I don't really care. And number 4 is Steel Vengeance. I think some people would hate me for this. I just don't think it's as strong as other people say. I think Steel Vengeance is a really good coaster, but I think there are actually some superior RMCs that I've ridden. I'll explain why later, but this thing, also combined with the experience, I think part of it is my negative Cedar Point experiences that kind of drags us down a little bit, and it was my number 1 for the longest time. But a different Cedar Point roller coaster comes just on top, and that is number 3. Maverick is just my favorite launch coaster, and I think I do prefer it to Steel Vengeance. The restraints got me my first ever ride, and I actually hated it. But ever since then, it's basically climbed my list every visit, and recently, as I've thought about it, I do think I prefer Maverick to Steel Vengeance. And number 2 is my number 2 RMC, and that is Twisted Colossus at Six Flags Magic Mountain. This thing is a beast. I wish it dueled, and I'm sure that'd put it higher on my list, but it doesn't really matter because I love every single element. Again, you basically get 2 rides in one. I just love all the elements this ride has to offer. The double down, the Top Gun stall, it's all great. And now on to number 1, Wicked Cyclone at Six Flags New England. This was a surprise for me. Now, riding in the morning, it was a little rainy, so I was running fast in the morning. It made the layout pretty well, but I have heard it runs sluggish in the morning. However, the late day ride that I got in this was insane. It was running speedy as and I just love this thing. It's definitely my favorite coaster, and I hope I get back here sometime because I really do like this park. It has 3 really good coasters, and I think a lot of the parks that I've been to are also really good as well. Thank you for watching this full video. I really appreciate it. I'll see you guys next time here on Midwest Coasters. Goodbye.